Yeah, I think to kind of go back to where we started down this path, I think it started from a realization on everyone's side that the nature of the businesses we're building are not necessarily pure tech companies. So you have to kind of decide to calibrate the growth level that you're actually expecting from the businesses to what their industries will actually enable and allow for. So, for example, a business like Rebel Foods it is at the end of the day a business that makes food. And to make food, you have to have the kitchens, you have to source the products, you have to have customers buy. It's not a pure software business where the growth can just be a J curve and an exponential growth. So you kind of calibrate back to understanding that, okay, steep linear growth is actually acceptable. And for a business like that, that makes a lot of sense and it works really well. Now, once you do that, then the business has to also internalize what's the right cost structure required for it, which they did a great job of doing. So I would say over the last 6 quarters or so, the company has done an amazing job of resizing its cost structure, calibrating how to get the most out of each kitchen, ensuring same kitchen sales growth is great. And therefore, they've actually put themselves in a place where they have been able to now both grow and continue to move towards that profitability metric. Other businesses like Bombay Shirt Company, Zeno, Droom have all been doing the same thing, where in different businesses, there have been different levers that they've had to move through. But I would say that it's a journey. And I think and like you said, we started down this path about 18 months ago. And as much as I would say I'm an impatient person, and I find that I want it to happen yesterday, I want it to happen right now, and I think we've had to accept that some of these changes take time because it's not just an idea; it's an entire DNA shift in a business, and so I'm pleased with the direction things have gone in. I think that now a lot of the companies have internalized this as their way of working going forward. JD put it well from Rebel at one point. He said profitability is freedom. And I think everybody feels that way, and everybody believes that they want that freedom. So another good example is Droom. I think we've seen a 90% growth in revenue over the last year, but a absolute maintenance of the same level of burn. So they haven't increased the burn. So they've been able to do the same revenue or increase revenue significantly while not increasing the burn in the business. So these moves are indicative to me that we've got everyone to believe that this is the right way to build and this is the right way to build value, not just valuation. Yeah, look, I think we've done a good job of picking spaces that are interesting. And if you go back to sort of how our investment approach has worked, we spent a lot of time thinking about what space is interesting, what space is going to have some change take place, how can we, where customer needs not being met. So whether that's been in apparel and how we've seen Bombay Shirt Company address the apparel need, it's a very, very large market, $70 billion industry. It's very fragmented. There aren't lots of differentiate. There's not a lot of differentiation among the brands. So you have a opportunity within that space to then execute well and create attractiveness for investors. So I think we've done a good job on spaces. Where we've actually had challenges is where we've picked good spaces, but execution has been a little less effective. And so in those cases, the funding has been more challenging. So we've seen that also. We picked the right space in quick commerce, but I think the execution for Dunzo was not on point. We picked the right space in jewelry, but again, Melora had its issues. But across the rest of the portfolio, health tech is up. So we see both Amaha and Zeno getting a lot of interest now. And I think their execution has been great. Amaha has opened their new IPD. So their inpatient facility will now bring the third leg of that business on and really complement an outpatient facility and an online presence that they've had with now an inpatient facility to really address the need holistically. I think that positions them well to now really be a differentiator in the specialty health space that's now getting a lot of interest and attraction. I think that what we've seen in terms of product businesses, Nua has done a great job of leveraging channels and new channels. And I think we'll talk a little bit about what's going on there in quick commerce as well, but leveraging new channels to actually drive their growth. So I feel like we've got the businesses in the right spaces. And the past 18-month journey has been about ensuring that the execution is tightened up. The ones that have done that well have seen very good interest and very good success. Rooter, you mentioned as well. I think that their unlocking of a new monetization stream through user monetization of digital goods was game changing. I mean, it just opened up an entirely different way to think about how that business can make money going forward. And they've really been able to take that forward. And you'll see a lot of interesting new product innovations from them as well. So I feel like we're in a healthy place across the portfolio because we picked the right spaces and now the companies are executing well against those plans. Yeah, I think there are two buckets to look at this in. One is product businesses, and the other is service or distribution businesses. Product businesses, a business like Nua, for example, has benefited tremendously from a willingness for quick commerce players to actually drive and change customer behavior into their channel. So we saw this when e-commerce came, and you saw Mama Earth was a big beneficiary of being able to grow on the back of Amazon, or Wow was a big beneficiary growing on the back of Amazon. We saw a whole bunch of Thrasio type businesses come about saying that we'll build on the back of Amazon, which is great. But in that world, excuse me, the distribution platform, Amazon or Flipkart or Geo, are the ones subsidizing the change of customer behavior to enable that to change that to allow for product companies to leverage that distribution. So I think that Nua has done a good job of taking advantage of that. Now, when you start to extend that to other services, so pharmacy, food, I think the question becomes, how much of a role do we want to play in subsidizing that consumer behavior change? Or put differently, will the opportunity exist to provide that distribution channel in a profitable manner? And I think for both Zeno and Rebel, it's an open question. I think that in both businesses, we have understood how our core business operates profitably, whether in Zeno's case, the store network delivers a tremendous EBITDA, we have great repeat purchase rates, we have a value proposition that works effectively for customers where we're able to cultivate trust based on a relationship that our pharmacist develops with a patient or a customer there. And so there's value added to the customer's life. It's reflected in the fact that customer acquisition cost is low. It's reflected in the fact that store network EBITDA is high. All that works well. Now, on top of that, you start to do something a bit different and start to say, okay, let me cut out the pharmacist relationship. Let's just talk about quick delivery. It's somewhat marginalizing the value that Zeno actually has to provide. And I think that there's a rationale and a thought for considering it, and there's a willingness for Zeno to kind of look at how it can play there. But I also think that there's a realization on Zeno's side that the value proposition that they offer the customer is much deeper and broader than just, I'm going to get you your drugs in 50 minutes. And same for Rebel. I think for Rebel, there's a opportunity to meet a customer need that might exist for you to have a sandwich in 5 minutes. But at the same time, there's a deeper customer connection around the quality of the brands that the business has. So whether that's Beirut's or Oven Story or Fossos or Wendy's, these are brands that really mean something to a customer, and they go looking for those brands specifically. Now, if that brand is going to come in 30 minutes instead of 5 minutes, I think people still probably want the brand. And so maybe there'll be some customers that will opt for needing that in that moment. And for that, I think the business needs to think about how it wants to meet that customer's need. But I think we're also very clear, like I said at the beginning, that being a sustainable business and having that freedom that profitability brings is probably of paramount importance than necessarily getting caught up in waves of unclear business models moving ahead. Yeah, CityFlo has been a great story. I think over the past year, it's been a journey to go from a B2C daily commute business to now a transport solution provider. And I think that it came again from this understanding that to make the economics of the business work, you have to look at what is our underlying cost structure. And in this business, the underlying cost structure is really the asset of the bus. So how can you get the most out of the asset of the bus? This is why, let's say in a retail business, you look at same store sales growth. You're saying, how do I get more revenue out of that asset of the store? The same way here, we have an asset of a bus. How do I get more from this bus? And then you start to realize that, wow, there are many different channels that you can work in to bring customers onto that bus. So when you start to look at it that way, and I'll come to cities in a second. When you start to look at it that way, you say, okay, I've got this bus that's running, but I've got businesses that want to give their customers or their employees a better experience on how they come to work. So great, I can work with them and get more utilization out of that bus asset, and then move that bus after it does the B2B route back to B2C. And you can find ways to optimize. And this is where, again, being tech-led makes a big difference, because you're not just looking at the bus as a box with four wheels and trying to figure out how to put more people in. You're using the tech to effectively optimize the routes and the utilization of that bus across it. And so you kind of built that competency out on how to do that. Then you extend that further and you start to say, well, that bus is sitting around on the weekends. I can use it for intercity travel as well. I can use it for events. I can use it for different things. So slowly what's happening is your asset utilization is going up, which is improving the margin that that bus can give you. Then you start to say, okay, look, on top of this now, what's happening? I'm developing the competency of running a bus network. And you realize that our cities, and Bombay very specifically, has had its challenges in terms of public transport. Now, the government's making a lot of great initiatives and pushes towards trying to improve upon that. And with one of those is really the electric push, and saying that let's start to drive more EVs. But actually, who's going to drive those EVs? How are they going to run? You have the government with the right idea. You have bus manufacturers saying, I'll provide them, but somebody needs to run these. And that's where, again, CityFlo's competency that's come from running a B2C and a B2B business in a bus network with over, I think we have now over 350 or 400 buses in our network, shows that we understand how to manage drivers, logistics, route management. So now you can bring that to what the government wants to do as well, and partner with them to kind of take that competency into that segment also. Then you say, okay, I've done all this really well here. I can now do this in Delhi. I can now do this in Bangalore. I can now do this in Hyderabad. And we were already doing it in Hyderabad. What I think happened was that we realized that Delhi is an even bigger market, and the analogs with how the Bombay market worked were much stronger. And so therefore we went there and we launched. And again, it was a reflection of the company having built a core competency. And I think that was the big realization, I guess, that when you start to double down on what you're really good at doing and start to take that into other markets, I think that really improved the company's ability to generate the revenue it wanted, the growth it wanted, without having to just irrationally grow costs. So yeah, I'm very excited about their position. I think they've now understood how to go about addressing this opportunity in various cities. And I think the next year we'll see a great unraveling of all of that story. Actually, if you think about it, that's been our premise in investing in companies. We're looking for where tech has an edge in what might otherwise have been a non-tech industry or a physical industry. And so your daily commute business is thought of as a bus driver and a bus. Yeah. But when you start to think about it as tech playing a role there, and how do you then remove costs from the system, make it a better experience for the end user? I mean, that's where I think you have a long-term competitive advantage. And so I think that they've always intended to be that. I think they've now found how to actually make that happen and how to deliver it, which is really exciting. One more thing to that. The other part to that, which is also very heartening, is their business model naturally enables them to create a better environment, which I think is the other thing that we've talked a lot about, is that this journey to driving consumption or playing on consumption or thinking about the next billion people's methods of consumption can't be one that ignores what the environmental impact or the social impact will be. And finding business models that are just naturally aligned to that, I think, is also really exciting to see. And so we've been able to take more cars off the road. As CityFlo gets more and more successful, fundamentally, cities should get less and less congested. And so that's just exciting to see that you're creating that effect as well. The regulator in India has been very good at maintaining discipline around how our financial markets operate. And I think that's insulated us or managed to ensure that the economy doesn't get swept up by a lot of, trends that might create whiplash when they go straight up and they come straight down. And so as a result, I think you've had to take a more measured approach to how we think about change in that space. You can go into certain industries and go in with an aggressive change mode. Like, let's say how Uber went into the taxi market and said, look, we're just going to change everything. We don't care what the regulator does. And you can do that. You can't do that in fintech the same way. So I think that being balanced and working within the frameworks that exist has been what's benefited both Rupeek and PayMe. In Rupeek's case, there's been a lot of stuff that's taken place around gold lending. A recent circular that just came out further supported Rupeek's approach to how to go about dealing with gold as an asset class to lend against. And I think that is, again, a reflection of their willingness to be extremely deliberate and measured and in line with how things need to move and be careful about it, methodical about it. So I think that's benefited them tremendously. And I think as a result of now we talked about interest rates coming down, we'll talk about sentiment changing. All of that will then benefit companies that have, I think, played the right path in terms of being cognizant of the rules of the land. Paymate has also had to navigate a lot of change in the space. Last year, there was a shift to scrutinize B2B lending against credit cards, which was a big part of Paymate's business. That's taken time to work through the system. Payment has had to go through and appropriately KYC all its customers, bring them back into the system. And I think all of that has enabled them to kind of grow their revenue back. It's taken some time to do it, but now I think that as sentiment comes back into the space and as people get more and more ready to put more money behind it in a environment where the rules are understood and the structure is clear, these guys will both be beneficiaries of that. And I think the fact that both of them are moving, Rupeek is already profitable, Paymate's moving close to profitability, that just puts them in a great position over the next 18 months to take advantage of all the work that they've done.